In the NFL, sometimes the warmest public praise is just the calm before a very cold, very calculated storm. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the brutal reality of the offseason, and we're going to do it by looking at one team, the Indianapolis Colts. It's a fascinating story of how a team can simultaneously make a massive, franchise-altering bet on a young quarterback's future, while at the very same time showing a beloved, respected veteran the door. It's a story about two different faces, two very different contracts, and the cold, hard math that really runs this entire league. Welcome to NFL Nexus, where we dig into the business behind the game. And hey, if you like this kind of deep dive, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you as part of the community.
Just listen to this. These are the words from the Colts general manager, Chris Ballard, talking about his veteran cornerback, Kenny Moore II. Someone I hold very highly. The city of Indianapolis shares that sentiment. I mean, that's the kind of language you use when you're talking about a franchise legend, right? It sounds like respect, like admiration. It paints this picture of a player who isn't just a jersey number, but someone who's really woven into the fabric of the team and the city. But if you follow the NFL long enough, you know you have to listen for what's not being said. Words like these, as warm as they are, can sometimes be a bit of a smokescreen for the tough, unemotional decisions that are always happening behind closed doors.
And there it is. The other shoe drops. The exact same general manager who is singing his praises is the one who ultimately signs off on his exit. And just like that, all that warm sentiment kind of vanishes, and it's replaced by the ice-cold reality of a business decision. This right here, this is the fundamental conflict you see every single offseason in the NFL. It's the public performance of appreciation versus the private and, yeah, often ruthless calculation of value. So let's peel back the layers on both sides of this story. Okay, first, let's look at the face of hope. This is the side of the team's ledger that's all about massive, long-term investment. It's about cautious optimism for the future. And this story, like so many in the NFL, it really begins and ends with the most important position in all of sports, the quarterback. For the Indianapolis Colts, that person is Anthony Richardson, and you better believe they have staked their entire future, pretty much every hope and dream for the next 5 to 10 years, on his shoulders.
Now you see this huge number on the screen, and it's tied to Daniel Jones's contract. We're using it here to give you a sense of the scale of what a franchise quarterback investment looks like. But for the Colts and Anthony Richardson, the commitment is arguably even deeper. They didn't just throw money at him, they spent the number 4 overall pick in the entire NFL draft to get him. And in the world of the NFL, that's like the ultimate currency. It's a huge, flashing neon sign from the front office that says, "This is our guy, he's the cornerstone." Everything the organization does from that point on, from the coaches they hire to the offensive linemen they sign, it's all designed to protect and develop that one single, incredibly precious asset.
So you can imagine the absolute nightmare scenario that unfolded just 4 games into Richardson's rookie season. He suffers a grade 3 AC joint sprain in his throwing shoulder, and just like that, his year is over. A collective groan, a sense of dread, just fell over the entire city of Indianapolis. You know, for a young quarterback, every single snap, every rep is like gold. So to lose almost all of your rookie season, that's not just a little setback, it's a potential disaster for his development timeline. The whole franchise was basically holding its breath. But now, months later, the reports are coming out and they are incredibly positive. He's on track with his recovery, he's back to throwing, and he's giving the team and its entire fan base a much-needed and very, very powerful dose of hope for this coming season.
And look, his comeback isn't just about getting lucky. It's a testament to the incredibly detailed, all-encompassing science of modern sports rehab. This here is basically the blueprint. It always starts with what they call the mental gauntlet. You have to overcome the psychological fear of that injury, learning to trust your own body again. For a quarterback, trusting that throwing shoulder is everything. Then comes the grind, the boring, relentless, monotonous work. We're talking treating rehab like it's your full-time job, an 8 to 3 gig day in and day out. And what's really interesting is how often teams look outside their own sport. There's this connection to the broader sports world, with teams sharing notes, learning from what worked for an elite athlete in another league. And the result of all that discipline, all that science, a young quarterback ready to reclaim his spot as the face of the franchise. That right there is the face of hope.
All right, now let's flip the coin. Because at the very same time the Colts are investing everything to nurture their future in Anthony Richardson, they are systematically and, frankly, unemotionally closing the book on a huge piece of their past. This is that other face of the NFL offseason, and this is the story of Kenny Moore II. It's a story where 9 years of loyalty, of Pro Bowl-level performance, are ultimately defeated by some pretty unforgiving arithmetic.
This timeline, it perfectly captures the entire life cycle of a modern NFL player. I mean, look at this journey. It's incredible. Back in 2017, Kenny Moore was a waiver claim. Not some high draft pick, but a guy that other teams had literally passed on. In fact, he was the first ever personnel move Chris Ballard made as the GM, a true diamond in the rough. And through sheer grit and hard work, he grinds his way to becoming a Pro Bowl selection. He gets rewarded with a huge contract in 2024 that, at the time, made him the highest paid slot corner in the league. And now, just 2 years after that, that very same GM is showing him the door. He went from an afterthought to an all-pro to, well, an expendable asset. It's the complete and often really harsh NFL story.
Now, the easy story here, the one teams kind of want you to believe, is that an older player gets let go because he can't play anymore. But that is just not the whole picture with Kenny Moore. Not even close. He was still a really productive, really valuable player on that defense. He started every single game he played in his final season. So let's be absolutely crystal clear about this. This decision wasn't made in the film room by coaches poring over game tape. No, it was made on a spreadsheet, probably in the accounting department. As the source material puts it so bluntly, his performance didn't end his career in Indy. Arithmetic did.
So why, right? Why would a team just get rid of a productive Pro Bowl player who the general manager himself says he holds in such high regard? Well, the answer isn't in his 40-yard dash time or his vertical leap. It's buried deep in the fine print of his contract and the cold, hard logic of the NFL salary cap. This is the place where all that warm sentiment slams head-on into a spreadsheet.
This is the exact question that gets shouted on sports talk radio and typed out in fan forums every single offseason. On the surface, it seems to defy all logic. You've got a Pro Bowl talent, a guy who's a leader in the locker room, someone who basically embodies the culture you're trying to build. Why on earth would you willingly create a hole on your roster and give up all those years of experience and institutional knowledge for what looks like almost no financial gain at all? The answer really pulls back the curtain on the cold, disciplined, and sometimes pretty ruthless thinking that runs the modern NFL.
Okay, let's actually get into the weeds with the numbers, because this little cable tells the whole story. In the final year of his contract, Moore was scheduled to count for $13.1 million against the Colts' salary cap. That's his cap hit. By cutting him, they saved $7.06 million of that. Okay, sounds pretty good so far. But here's the catch. That little line item called dead money, that's a $6.5 million charge that stays on their books for a player who isn't even on their team anymore. So when you do the math, the net savings after everything is said and done is only about $1 million. Just let that sink in for a second. For 9 years of service, for a Pro Bowl player, for a leader, the team decided it wasn't worth it to keep him for the cost of just $1 million in cap space.
So let's really focus on this term for a second, because dead money is one of the most important and maybe most misunderstood concepts in the league. The best way to think of it is like the financial ghost of a contract you already signed. It's guaranteed money, usually from a big signing bonus that was paid to the player up front. But for salary cap accounting, it gets spread out over the whole life of the contract. So even when Kenny Moore is playing for a different team next year, the Colts are still paying a piece of his old contract, over $6 million of it. That counts against their spending limit. It's a bill that doesn't just go away because the player does. And this quote from the source material, man, this is the smoking gun. This tells you everything. This wasn't some sudden agonizing decision the team made this offseason. It was planned. It was predetermined. You see, the final year of Kenny Moore's contract had $0 in guaranteed money. That's not an accident. That was a feature, not a bug. It was, as the article so brilliantly and kind of chillingly puts it, an ejection seat that was built right into the contract the day he signed it 2 years ago. His exit was never really a question of if, it was always just a question of when.
Now, when you zoom out a little bit, this whole situation with Kenny Moore, it's bigger than just the Indianapolis Colts. It really exposes a standard operating procedure, a playbook, that's used by pretty much every single team in the NFL. It's a cold calculus where things like sentiment and loyalty are always, and I mean always, second to long-term financial strategy. And the public language the teams use to explain these moves is just as calculated as the contracts themselves.
And when you put these two stories right next to each other, you see the fundamental tension that's at the very heart of every NFL front office. Anthony Richardson is the investment. He is the future. He's a protected asset. He represents hope for all the seasons to come. Kenny Moore, through no real fault of his own, he became the expense. He represents the team's history. He became an expendable veteran, a casualty of the salary cap. You see, both players are valuable, but one is valued for what he might become down the road, while the other was let go because of what he was scheduled to cost right now.
And look, Moore's departure wasn't just some isolated event. It was the biggest, most high-profile move in a much larger, and you could argue much riskier, strategic shift for the Colts. In just one offseason, their defense has been bleeding experience. This number here shows how many snaps they lost in just 1 week. But over the course of the whole offseason, we're talking thousands of snaps from veteran players just gone. Moore's exit is really the cherry on top of a very deliberate, very aggressive organizational bet. Out with the older, more expensive veterans, and in with young, unproven, and most importantly, much, much cheaper talent.
Publicly, moves like this are almost always gift-wrapped in the exact same carefully crafted story. It's a playbook, and every team in the league has a copy. The team will announce that it was a mutual decision. The GM might say something about the player wanting a change of scenery, and the player, to his credit, usually handles it with total class, talking about how much he loves the city and the fans. It's all a bit of a performance, and it's designed for 2 main reasons. 1, to protect the team from angry fans for cutting a beloved player, and 2, to protect the player's dignity and his value on the open market. But as we've already uncovered, the ink on that contract had written the final chapter long before any of these public statements were ever dreamed up.
So, at the end of the day, this isn't just a story about the Colts. It's a story about the fundamental nature of the salary cap era in the NFL, and it really forces you to look at your own team and ask a pretty uncomfortable question. Now, before we leave you with that final thought, if you enjoy these kinds of deep dives, a great way to support what we do here at NFL Nexus is by checking out our coloring books. Seriously, they're perfect for fans of any age, kids, grandkids, even adults who want to relax. They're a fun way to connect with the game. You can find them using the QR code right there on your screen or by clicking the link in the description. Your support really does help us keep making these explainers for you. So here's the final question I want you to chew on. Think about your favorite veteran player on your team, the heart and soul guy, the one the GM is always praising in public. Now go look up his contract, because there's a good chance he's just one non-guaranteed year away from becoming the next Kenny Moore. Let me know in the comments who you think that player is for your team. Thanks for watching.